In the early months of 1942, the Pacific was a cauldron of uncertainty. Few Americans realized just how desperate the situation had become beneath the surface of the sea. One little-known fact stands out. In the wake of Pearl Harbor, the U.S. submarine fleet, outnumbered, under-equipped, and armed with torpedoes notorious for malfunctioning, was still tasked with carrying the weight of America's early offensive. And deep in these treacherous waters, the submarine USS Perch, hull number SS-176, was about to vanish into wartime obscurity. Perch had already seen service before the war, but by February 1942, she was thrust into a collapsing defensive line as Japanese forces swept across Southeast Asia. Her new orders placed her near Java, shadowing enemy troop movements rushing toward the island. The challenge was immediate and severe. The Java Sea was tightening into a trap. Allied airfields were crumbling, Dutch naval support was dwindling, and Japanese destroyers prowled with ruthless efficiency. For Lieutenant Commander David A. Hurt and the 60 men aboard Perch, every mile forward meant slipping deeper into enemy-dominated waters. What weighed heavily on the crew was not only the enemy, but their own equipment. Torpedoes frequently ran too shallow or failed to detonate. Sonar technology lagged far behind that of the Japanese, and Perch herself, launched in 1936, was already considered outdated compared to newer U.S. fleet submarines. The men kept these concerns mostly to themselves, recording their thoughts in brief diary fragments. One crewman would later recall, "We were holding the line with whatever we had left, even if it felt like the ocean was getting smaller every day." As February drew to an end, Perch stalked a Japanese convoy near Borneo, preparing for a nighttime attack. But before Hurt could maneuver into firing position, explosions rocked the submarine. Japanese destroyers had spotted her, possibly from a glint of periscope glass or a stray sonar ping, and unleashed a barrage of depth charges. The shock waves ruptured light fixtures, buckled hull plates, and knocked equipment from its mounts. Damage controlled, Perch managed to slip away into the dark. But this was only the beginning. On March 1st, after enduring 2 more days of relentless pursuit, Perch surfaced to recharge batteries. Dawn was approaching when shadows materialized on the horizon. 2 Japanese destroyers, closing rapidly. Hurt made a fateful decision. With dive planes damaged and speed limited, Perch could neither outrun nor reliably submerge. Instead, he ordered a surface fight, an almost unheard-of tactic for an American submarine. The crew scrambled to their gun stations as 4.7-inch shells from the destroyers screamed overhead. Perch returned fire with her deck gun, but she was heavily outmatched. A shell struck near the conning tower, crippling communications. Depth charging resumed moments later as the submarine attempted an emergency dive. Below the surface, the situation grew catastrophic. Ballast tanks ruptured, pressure hull seams groaned under strain, and electrical systems flickered. With the boat barely controllable, Hurt convened his officers. The conclusion was grim. Perch could not fight, she could not dive, and remaining afloat meant certain destruction. Shortly before dawn, on March 3rd, the order was given: scuttle the ship. The crew set demolition charges, opened valves, and prepared to abandon the submarine. As Perch slowly filled with seawater, the men removed classified materials and leapt into waiting Japanese boats. Shockingly, all but one of the crew survived. They became prisoners of war, unaware of the brutal years ahead in Japanese captivity. But while the crew's fate was recorded, the submarine's final resting place remained unknown. Post-war investigators sought answers, combing through Japanese naval logs that mentioned a heavily damaged Allied submarine in the Java Sea. Yet coordinates were vague, wartime reports inconsistent, and the ocean floor uncharted. For decades, Perch existed only as a footnote, lost to the sea, unconfirmed and unmapped. The uncertainty grew into quiet speculation. Had she broken apart during scuttling, drifted with underwater currents, or settled somewhere far from her last reported position? Modern oceanographers would eventually identify a wreck matching Perch's design, but during the long decades before discovery, the submarine existed as both tragedy and mystery. Her story became emblematic of the early Pacific War, courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and silence where records failed to illuminate the truth. As the chapter of the USS Perch closes, it opens the door to another disappearance, one even more perplexing, involving a submarine that vanished without distress, without witnesses, and without a trace. A submarine known to have reported success and then slipped into total silence. In the summer of 1942, as the fog-shrouded Aleutian Islands became an unexpected battleground, a striking fact often goes unnoticed. The region saw some of the most isolated and least documented submarine operations of the entire war. Here, in waters colder and deeper than almost anywhere U.S. submariners had trained for, the newly commissioned USS Grunion, SS-216, embarked on her first and last combat patrol. Her disappearance would later become one of the most enduring mysteries of the Pacific Campaign. Grunion was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Maynard Abel, a respected officer known for his calm demeanor and meticulous planning. He had earned the confidence of his crew and superiors, and his new submarine represented the latest in U.S. fleet submarine design. Arriving at Dutch Harbor in June, Abel received orders to patrol the frigid waters surrounding Kiska, where Japanese troops had occupied the remote volcanic island a month earlier. The battle for the Aleutians had begun quietly, but would become a harsh test of endurance. Sub-zero winds, unpredictable currents, and waters so deep that a disabled submarine would vanish instantly. The operational struggle was immense from the start. Sensors were affected by cold anomalies, periscopes fogged internally, and navigational charts were notoriously incomplete. The men often fought against both sea and enemy before they ever saw combat. Grunion's first patrols revealed Japanese transport activity around Kiska Harbor, prompting Abel to press closer. In early July, the submarine scored confirmed torpedo hits on enemy vessels, including reports of a sinking of the transport Kano Maru. Although torpedoes of this era were prone to malfunction, Grunion's early success boosted crew morale dramatically. Messages intercepted by U.S. Navy Command suggested mounting Japanese anxiety in the area. In his radio reports, Abeli noted the tension. Fog heavy, enemy patrols active, submarine remains undetected. These short, almost clinical updates hinted at the pressure the crew faced on a daily basis. Enemy anti-submarine vessels prowled aggressively around Kiska, using hydrophones and explosive charges to flush out American boats. Japanese records later revealed how deeply they feared U.S. submarines disrupting their supply lines. And yet, despite the threat, Grunion continued pressing the attack. On July 30th, Grunion sent what would be her final message. It was operational, brief, and revealed nothing unusual. She had been ordered to return to Dutch Harbor. No mechanical issues reported, no mention of enemy contact, no distress. And then, silence. When Grunion failed to arrive on August 6th, U.S. commanders grew concerned, but were not yet alarmed. Early war communications were often unreliable. But as more days passed, the silence became ominous. Search aircraft flew over possible surfacing locations. No oil slicks, no wreckage, nothing. The Navy listed Grunion as missing, presumed lost with all 70 men. What followed was decades of speculation. Japanese destroyer logs from Kiska included references to anti-submarine attacks around the time of Grunion's disappearance, but none were definitive. The biggest clue emerged from the crew of the armed Japanese merchant vessel Kofu Maru, who reported firing upon a surfaced submarine that same week. According to wartime testimonies, the vessel used a rare bow-mounted gun, an unusual weapon whose shells behaved erratically. Some historians theorized a ricochet may have caused catastrophic damage to a rising periscope or sail. Still, without evidence from the seafloor, all theories remained conjecture. Then came the turning point, decades later. In the early 2000s, the sons of Manard Abel launched their own private search for the submarine. Studying currents, sonar patterns, and wartime records, they partnered with a side-scan sonar team to survey volcanic slopes near Kiska. Their work raised a startling possibility. Grunion might have been struck while surfacing, attempting an emergency dive that failed in the steep underwater terrain. Subsequent sonar images revealed what appeared to be a submarine's forward hull crushed upon impact, suggesting that the boat might have slid down a volcanic ridge after sustaining damage. This theory offered partial closure, yet questions persist. Why did Grunion break radio contact so abruptly? Did she encounter uncharted underwater pinnacles common to the Aleutians? Or did an unseen Japanese patrol deliver the final blow? What remains certain is the legacy of Abel and his crew. Their patrol symbolized the brutal, often undocumented battles fought in some of the harshest waters on Earth. Modern submariners still study the Aleutian operations for lessons in navigation, weather, and tactical unpredictability, testament to the challenges Grunion faced. As we close the chapter on Grunion's mysterious end, the Pacific reveals yet another enigma, one involving a submarine lost off the coast of Japan itself, where enemy records hinted at destruction, but never confirmed a kill. A wartime puzzle surrounding a boat named Pickerel. By the autumn of 1943, the undersea war in the Pacific had shifted decisively in America's favor, but not without cost. Lost amid the broader narrative of U.S. victories is a haunting detail. Several submarines vanished not in chaotic battles, but in regions where historians expected the safest waters. Among these enigmas stands the USS Pickerel, SS-177, a Porpoise-class submarine assigned to hunt shipping off northern Honshu. Her disappearance remains one of the most confounding mysteries to emerge from the deep, cold waters of the Japanese home islands. Pickerel was an experienced veteran by the time she sailed from Midway in March 1943. Commanded by Lieutenant Commander Augustus H. McVeigh III, an officer known for his quiet intensity and strict professionalism, Pickerel carried a seasoned crew and a boat well tested by earlier Pacific patrols. Yet her orders on this 8th patrol were more dangerous than anything she had faced before. She was to penetrate shipping lanes near Misawa and Hachinoe, areas protected by layers of Japanese anti-submarine patrols, whose tactics had grown increasingly sophisticated through 1943. The struggle began even before Pickerel approached the Japanese coast. Spring storms rolled down from Siberia, turning the sea into a violent landscape of towering swells and freezing spray. Navigating in this region demanded precision. Magnetic deviations, unstable weather systems, and unpredictable currents challenged even the most experienced officers. But more concerning were the Japanese defenses: shore-based aircraft, roving submarine chasers, and destroyers equipped with depth charges calibrated to new settings, capable of reaching deeper diving American boats. Pickerel's early dispatches reflected the tension of operating in these waters. An entry in McVeigh's patrol report noted, "Weather remains harsh, enemy patrol lines thick, no opportunity yet for clean approach." These were not the routine frustrations of a submarine commander, but warnings of the hostile environment closing around them. On April 3rd, Pickerel reported engaging a Japanese cargo vessel, launching multiple torpedoes in cold, choppy seas. The results were uncertain. No visual confirmation was possible due to fog. Days later, Japanese naval records indicated a freighter had been struck in the region, strongly suggesting Pickerel had scored a hit. The crew would have felt a surge of momentum. They knew, however, that successful attacks drew immediate and often brutal retaliation. According to Japanese archives, anti-submarine forces recorded heavy depth charge activity in the northern Honshu area beginning April 6th. Patrol ships Bunzan Maru and Kawaguchi Maru reported persistent contact with an American submarine, followed by a series of attacks. Yet even here, documentation becomes murky. Japanese logs mention oil slicks and debris, but none could be conclusively tied to Pickerel. Oil slicks often drifted for miles. Debris could belong to auxiliary craft, and no reported debris included U.S. naval markings. In Washington, no one realized anything was wrong. Pickerel was not scheduled to report until later in April, and her silence was not unusual. Unreliable long-range radio communications often left submarines uncontactable for days, sometimes weeks. But as April turned to May, concern began to overshadow routine expectation. A message ordering Pickerel to shift patrol areas went unanswered. So did the next and the next. It was only after the fall of Attu in late May, when intelligence analysts reviewed submarine positions, that the loss became unmistakable. Pickerel had vanished. The U.S. Navy's post-war investigations sought clarity in Japanese records, but what they found instead was ambiguity. Tokyo's accounts referenced possible submarine kills near northern Honshu, but none provided definitive proof. A schematic cross-section reveals the dramatic complexity of abyssal slopes, charting the path for subsurface exploration. An alternate theory emerged. Pickerel's own equipment might have failed her. Torpedo tube malfunctions or internal flooding could have forced an emergency dive gone catastrophically wrong. Swallowed by perpetual night and immense pressure, the vessel remains a solitary, faint shape on the boundless abyssal plain. Other researchers examined intelligence, suggesting Pickerel may have struck a mine. Japan had laid extensive defensive fields along Honshu's coast, some uncharted, and others positioned far beyond their documented boundaries due to wartime improvisation. A drifting or misplaced mine could have silently detonated beneath her hull, leaving no survivors and no trail. Modern search efforts have yielded only frustration. The chaotic, jagged spikes on the sonar screen reveal a volcanic, unforgiving landscape far below, masking any trace of the lost vessel. The weight of sacrifice rests in the gentle transfer of this folded flag, an irreplaceable final salute. Held carefully in the gentle archival light, this fragile letter offers an intimate glimpse into a distant, handwritten past. Under the urgent red operational light, his quiet, focused intensity held the fate of the entire vessel. Barely pausing for breath in Fremantle, the massive submarine slices through the harbor waters, leaving a widening wake as it rushes back toward the unknown ocean expanse. The entire Pacific campaign hinged on the volatile Molucca Sea, marked strategically only by an ominous red question mark. Under the clear southern hemisphere sun, the crew of the USS Capelin diligently loads critical supplies at Fremantle, preparing the submarine for her next war patrol. A critical mechanical fault requires immediate, straining intervention. The crew fights the rising pressure deep within the hull. Lieutenant Commander Marshall and his command crew stand ready on the bridge of the USS Capelin, masters of the deep and guardians of the sea lanes. Her orders were straightforward but dangerous: operate in the eastern Netherlands East Indies, specifically the Molucca Sea and the approaches to Celebes. It was an area where geography favored the defender: narrow straits, heavy currents, and island chains that funneled submarines into predictable routes. Japanese forces had seeded many of these choke points with mines after repeated American incursions. Capelin set out from Darwin on November 30th, fully aware she was entering some of the most treacherous waters in the enemy's defensive sphere. The tactical struggle became apparent almost immediately. Capelin logged only one verified enemy engagement during her patrol, a skirmish on December 2nd near Kauai Bay, Halmahera, where she reportedly sank a Japanese transport and damaged another vessel. But after this burst of activity, radio silence returned. Unlike other U.S. submarines, Capelin did not send periodic situation reports. Some historians believe this reflected Marshall's operational discipline. Others suspect ongoing mechanical difficulties that compromised her radar or radio systems. What is known is that Capelin was last seen, visually, by another American submarine. On December 9th, the USS Bonefish, SS-223, spotted Capelin northeast of Celebes. Bonefish flashed a signal lamp proposing a rendezvous, but Capelin did not respond. Instead, she dipped below the surface and continued her course. At the time, Bonefish's crew assumed the gesture was simply missed or ignored due to tactical caution. Only later would this non-response take on a somber significance. From that point forward, Capelin vanished. No distress call, no enemy sighting, no reported damage, just silence. Post-war research brought the first hints of what might have happened. Japanese anti-submarine logs from the region mentioned several depth-charge attacks during early December, though none were specifically confirmed as submarine kills. One report, dated December 11th, described a possible underwater contact in the Molucca Sea, followed by multiple depth charges and observed oil. Yet even this account was vague. Japanese captains often claimed kills to boost morale or avoid reprimand for expending charges. Without debris, the report remained inconclusive. The second, and more compelling theory, centered on mines. Japanese defensive maps revealed dense minefields guarding the southern approaches to Moritai and the straits west of Halmahera. These fields were so extensive that even Japanese transports occasionally struck their own mines. Allied intelligence underestimated their size, and some fields were intentionally placed outside charted boundaries. If Capelin passed through one of these zones, even a single mine could have detonated beneath her pressure hull with catastrophic force. Such an explosion would have left no time for a distress call and no survivors. Mechanical failure was also a contender. The issues observed during Capelin's earlier operations raised fears that a latent defect might have resurfaced. A propulsion malfunction during an evasive dive or a radar failure at a critical moment could have proven fatal in a region where enemy aircraft and destroyers patrolled aggressively. A flooded compartment, a stuck valve, or a malfunctioning diving plane might have forced her below crush depth, where the immense pressure would have silenced the boat instantly. Then there was the haunting detail reported by Australian coast watchers: rumors of an unidentified explosion far from shipping lanes on a December 9th in 1943. The record, imprecise and unverified, has fueled speculation for decades. Was it a mine, a depth charge, or something else entirely? No wreckage ever washed ashore, no oil slick was definitively tied to Capelin, and no prisoner of war reports ever mentioned her crew. Modern search teams have occasionally probed the region, but the underwater terrain is unforgiving. The Molucca Sea reaches abyssal depths of over 15,000 feet. Deeper than light, the sonar pierces the gloom, identifying unusual oblong forms resting among the abyssal ridges. Capelin's fate remains one of the most elusive puzzles of Pacific submarine warfare. Families received notification of loss with no explanation, just the wartime phrase, overdue and presumed lost. Her crew of 76 men became part of the silent toll of undersea conflict, their story marked by a complete absence of physical evidence. And yet, even as analysts attempted to piece together the mystery, another submarine was preparing to enter the Philippine Sea, one that would leave behind more clues, more wreckage, and a trail of reports that hinted at her violent final moments. This was USS Grayback, whose disappearance would spark decades of speculation before the Pacific finally surrendered some of its secrets. By early 1944, the U.S. Navy's submarine campaign was entering a phase of relentless pressure on Japanese supply routes, especially in the Philippine Sea, a vast, contested expanse where dozens of Allied boats stalked convoys with increasing success. But within this momentum lies a chilling footnote. Even experienced submarines, equipped with the latest American technology, were still vanishing without a trace. Among the most perplexing of these losses was the USS Grayback, SS-208, a Tambor-class submarine whose final patrol combined both documented heroism and a disappearance that puzzled analysts for more than 7 decades. Grayback had already earned a fierce reputation by the time she left Pearl Harbor for her 10th patrol in January 1944. Commanded by Lieutenant Commander John A. Moore, an officer widely respected for his aggressive tactics and calm under fire, the submarine had built a formidable record: multiple successful patrols, confirmed sinkings, and a crew seasoned by some of the toughest engagements of the Pacific War. Her mission this time: penetrate the Philippine Sea near Okinawa and disrupt enemy shipping lanes vital to Japan's defense of the home islands. From the start, the struggle was intense. The Philippine Sea was heavily patrolled, especially as Japanese intelligence realized the increasing threat posed by American submarines. Aircraft based on Okinawa, Amami Oshima, and Formosa roamed the skies daily, while destroyers conducted continuous anti-submarine sweeps along convoy routes. Grayback's challenges were compounded by the notoriously unreliable Mark 14 torpedo, still prone to running deep or failing to detonate properly. Despite these limitations, Moore and his crew were undeterred. In February, Grayback's patrol reports crackled across the Pacific with signs of success. On February 19th, she intercepted a convoy south of Okinawa and launched a daring nighttime attack, sinking the transport Nampo Maru. Fighting the deep with frantic taps, the crew strains their ears against the agonizing groan of the hull as the pressure forces them down. Critical depletion wasn't just low rations, it was the physics of failure, watching our last payload bounce uselessly on the sea. The submarine pitched violently through the heavy seas, but Moore ignored the rocking, fixing their desperate pursuit onto the map. Static replaced hope, leaving only the cold finality of the naval report. Overdue, presumed lost. Years after the conflict, intelligence analysts pore over the original Japanese naval logs, translating the kanji to reveal the precise details of a critical aerial attack recorded decades prior. The spreading oil slick confirmed the hit, yet the navigator hesitated, his X reflecting the uncertainty of war. Deep beneath the surface, researchers dissect every theory of catastrophic failure, hunting for the weakness hidden within the pressure hull. The vast, unexplored topography of the Philippine Sea reveals its immense trenches. Above the crushing depth, a research vessel begins its solitary search into the abyss. A distinct sonar anomaly guides the ROV through the deep gloom, revealing the eerie, upright form of a lost WWII submarine standing sentinel off the coast of Okinawa. Decades of searching ended when modern GPS corrected a handwritten historical error, revealing the crushing bow damage of the grayback deep beneath the waves. The grayback crests the waves just as the ordnance strikes. The catastrophic breach of the forward hull seals the submarine's fate in the Philippine Sea. Resting in eternal silence, the USS Grayback serves as the final, honored post for her 80 lost crew members. Their names rise from the deep, ensuring their sacrifice is never forgotten. As Grayback's fate became clearer, one final chapter awaited, another lost boat, another silent ending. Submarines whose stories would help define the broader shadow war beneath the Pacific waves, and whose mysteries would endure long after the guns of World War II fell silent. The Pacific War ended in 1945 with Japan's formal surrender, but for naval historians and the families of missing submariners, the conflict did not conclude so neatly. Beneath the surface of the world's largest ocean lay a silent archive of wartime uncertainty, wrecks undiscovered, patrols unreturned, and submarines whose final moments had slipped into darkness. In the years following the war, U.S. intelligence officers, oceanographers, and former submariners attempted to reconstruct the fates of dozens of lost boats. Yet, even with access to captured Japanese records, a haunting truth became apparent. Many answers would remain elusive. The struggle to uncover these fates began almost immediately after Japan's surrender. U.S. Navy teams were assigned to examine the vast troves of Japanese operational logs, minefield maps, convoy reports, and anti-submarine warfare records. The goal was to cross-reference American losses with enemy claims, an effort codenamed Project ATR, Anti-Submarine Track Review. But analysts soon realized the enormity of the task. Japanese record-keeping varied widely by unit. Some logs were destroyed in the final weeks of the war, others were incomplete, rushed or muddled by the fog of combat. Even so, investigators combed through thousands of pages to identify patterns. For the 5 submarines chronicled in this series, Perch, Grunion, Pickerel, Capelin, and Grayback, these post-war efforts provided fragments rather than firm conclusions. Admirals and analysts often found themselves comparing contradictory reports or trying to interpret vague coordinates taken during chaotic naval engagements. One investigator later recalled, "We were looking for precision in records written during confusion." The insight underscored the reality. The Pacific Ocean was too vast, submarine warfare too chaotic, and wartime documentation too inconsistent to provide perfect clarity. But these challenges did not stop researchers from questioning the missing pieces. Why did certain submarines vanish without distress calls? Were uncharted minefields responsible for more losses than the Navy acknowledged? How many submarines were destroyed in attacks never recognized by either side? As the Cold War advanced and technology accelerated, new methods of underwater exploration offered hope that the answers might finally emerge. During the 1960s and 70s, breakthroughs in deep-sea sonar mapping inspired naval researchers to attempt surveys of known patrol areas. These early efforts were limited by crude imaging and enormous search zones, but they identified several wrecks, offering valuable insights into wartime conditions. The discovery of USS Wahoo in the La Perouse Strait and USS Lagarto in the Gulf of Siam proved that even long-lost submarines could eventually be found. Yet for every answered question, more emerged. Some wrecks bore damage inconsistent with official accounts, suggesting unknown engagements or mechanical failures. Others lay far from their expected patrol routes, raising the possibility of navigational errors or forced tactical diversions.
The disappearance of Capelin, for example, left investigators divided. Some believed Japanese anti-submarine records pointed to a successful kill, while others concluded mines were the most probable explanation.
In the case of Pickerel, logs mentioned attacks but no definitive kill confirmation. For Grunion, sonar findings decades later revealed a submarine's hull crushed along an underwater ridge, illuminating one of the war's long-standing puzzles. And Grayback, located in 2019 after correcting a single misread coordinate, emphasized how small errors could obscure an entire submarine's fate for generations. These discoveries not only provided closure, but reshaped the historical narrative. They highlighted how vulnerable submarines were to elements that went beyond enemy fire: unpredictable weather, uncharted geological features, faulty equipment, or the simple misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They also underscored the courage of the men who operated in the most dangerous domain of naval warfare, a realm where a single mistake could send a steel vessel plunging thousands of feet into darkness. In recent years, advanced ROVs, multi-beam sonar, and deep-sea robotics have allowed researchers to revisit wartime mysteries with unprecedented detail. Teams such as the Lost 52 project have dedicated themselves to finding and documenting lost American submarines, mapping wrecks with precision, creating digital models, and offering long-awaited answers to families. The discoveries of USS R-12, USS S-28, USS Stickleback, and others stand as powerful reminders that the search continues, even 8 decades after the war. Yet modern insights also carry a deeper reflection. These submarines, once instruments of wartime strategy, have become underwater memorials, resting places that deserve quiet respect. Their wrecks are treated as war graves, protected by international law, and visited only by remote cameras rather than divers. They preserve the final moments of crews who never returned, their stories sealed within steel hulls that have become part of the ocean's enduring history. The closing chapter of this series brings a realization. The Pacific, despite its vastness, does not erase. It conceals, it preserves, and in time, it reveals. The 5 submarines chronicled here represent only a portion of America's undersea losses in World War II. Each disappearance, each unanswered question, reminds us that history is often incomplete, shaped as much by what is missing as by what is known. And as technology advances and new expeditions push deeper into the world's oceans, more of these long silent stories may one day surface, allowing the final roll call of lost submariners to be honored with the clarity and dignity they deserve. For now, the Pacific keeps its secrets, but the search continues.